Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about the important concept of permissions inside of OWL. And specifically, we're going to talk about access to a data set that's been scanned inside of OWL and how we do that dynamically. So the first thing I'm going to do is jump over to my admin console by clicking the gear icon here. And I'm going to look at security just to see what options we have. For dataset security, it's its own special section because it is all dynamic-based security. So to turn it on, once we have this enabled, it means that any dataset scan that happens when we build up a dataset then needs to be associated with some type of role. And then any user in that role will be able to access that particular dataset. In dev environments, sometimes you may see these turned off because it's pretty open and it's a lot of use case-based stuff and probably not sensitive data. Once we turn this on, we'll look at some of our other options that are a little bit more granular. For now, we'll save the ACLs, which is just access control lists for dataset access at a very granular level for another video set. But I do want to touch on the role data preview, the dataset train, and the dataset rules. From within a dataset specifically, you can decide if users should always have to have this preview role if they want to see drill-in details of source data. You also can globally apply a dataset train role, which means anybody in that role will be able to downtrain items, retrain the model so that they can give feedback to the OWL training engine so that future scans will be applying any training rules that that user has applied to that data set. So it does give some type of an edit mode to the data set itself, and you may want to restrict that access to a set of users. And then rules. So if you don't have this turned on, anyone could come into any data set and write a rule. If you do have it turned on, it will require that user to have the dataset rules role so that they could come in and actually create a rule against the dataset. So these are all optional settings, but once you turn them on, just be aware that you will want to apply a set of users if you're using Active Directory, so group mapping to these particular roles, or if you're using a standard user store, you'll apply those users directly to these particular roles. So those are key out-of-the-box options. And your default dataset owner is also an option here. So you may, for everyone that's allowed to write an L check, let them see the results immediately versus having to go through a provision process that says someone needs to then grant that user access to the dataset they just created. Once you have your dataset security turned on and all the other options that you would like, you'll come back into your admin console and you'll take a look at applying access to those datasets in two different ways. You could do it at a bulk level by going into roles, or at a granular level if you have a specific dataset you want to apply access to. So we'll start by going into roles. In a previous video for Active Directory mapping, we saw that we created a role of HR just as a sample. It's a dynamic role, nothing out of the box. A lot of these ones down below are OWL roles out of the box. So as we touched on earlier, the data preview, the dataset rules, the dataset train that we all talked about, that's where you would apply those functional levels of access here. But in this case, since we're doing a dynamic dataset mapping to a specific role that we've created, let's go into our custom HR role and then take a look at all the data sets that are in that role. Right now, I see my list of every data set that's been created in the system, but I see that none of them have been applied to this role. So to do that, I will just pick a few and hit update. And now, what that means is anyone that logs into the system and has the role of HR applied to them will be granted access to these three data sets. And so they'll be able to go into those data sets and see them, view the data, and depending on your other levels of granular control, have specific functions from within that data set as well. If we want to go back, and maybe we have a very specific data set that just got scanned and we want to manage it individually, you could come in this way as well. And let's say I know the data set that I want, and I want to apply it to the HR role. So you can come in as a one-off situation and do it that way as well. Or if you have a data set and you want to bulk apply roles, you can apply many at a time, similar to the other screen, and then hit update. Once that's done, the same rules apply. So anyone that comes in with the HR role will have access to this data set as well. Thanks.